Hello everybody, welcome back to Capture the Frag, your number one source for all shooter gaming news. I'm your host, BLUMONKEY, and today we're going to be talking everything we know about Boundary. Now, for any of you who don't know, Boundary is a competitive multiplayer shooter that is set in space. But don't start thinking futuristic laser weapons, because Boundary actually has much more of a modern aesthetic, as the developers were going for, and we'll get into that in just a second. In today's video, we'll address crossplay, campaign, classes, weapon customization, the overall feel of the game. We'll talk about maps, VR support. We'll talk about the game's mechanics, and along the way, I'll give my thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Spoiler alert, I'm super stoked for this game. Guys, before we start getting into it, I wanted to remind you that leaving me a like on the video does help the channel out a ton. And if you want to see new videos just like this every single week, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Boundary is a zero-G competitive multiplayer shooter where space stations and astronauts are the name of the game. It's being developed by a small studio that call themselves Surgical Scalpels, and the release date is currently set to be summer 2021, which is very interesting because summer 2021 is right around the corner. This game was literally just delayed, so you would think that we would see an actual release date for this game. I have a feeling that it might be delayed just a little bit further, but as of right now, summer 2021 is what they're shooting for. Now, this game gives me a really Call of Duty vibe. If you're watching the gameplay, I mean, just look at the combat mechanics. I mean, even the UI, it has a very Call of Duty feel, and to me, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, Call of Duty has been massively successful, and there's a reason for that, and I absolutely do not blame them for taking inspiration from these games. And it looks really smooth. It looks great. Looks surprisingly polished. So maybe I spoke too soon, and we will get a release date summer 2021, fingers crossed. And all in all, it's just got a very unique aesthetic. I have never, and I can almost guarantee that you have never, seen a shooter game like this in a setting like this. In an interview with Noisy Pixel, the technical director of the game, Frank Mingbo Lee, said that the concept of the game actually started from just a little comic strip with two astronauts fighting in space, and it developed into what you see in front of you today, which I think is pretty cool. So let's dive into the topics, starting with crossplay. Now, in that same interview with Noisy Pixel, Frank Mingbo Lee did say that they tested out crossplay functionality and, quote, "it works, but implementing that into a full release presents various challenges we are currently looking at." So I think the goal with the game right now, as far as, you know, the priorities that the studio is kind of prioritizing, they just want to get the game out. Crossplay looks like it will be happening in the future, just not at launch, which as a PC player, I'm totally fine with. I really like going up against fellow mouse and keyboard players. But I also don't mind, you know, having a bigger player base in any game, especially a game like this that's developed by a smaller studio and might not see as much clout, I guess you could say. At launch, Boundary is going to have 4 different game modes: Team Deathmatch, Facility Capture, Skirmish, and Orbital Purge. Team Deathmatch is pretty self-explanatory. Whichever team gets the most kills wins. Facility Capture is going to be pretty familiar to you guys as well. Basically domination. So you got, you know, multiple different points on the map that your team's going to try to take control of, and the more control points you have captured, the more points you're going to accumulate, and the team with the most points wins. Skirmish seems like it's going to be pretty fun. Everybody starts with a random loadout, but everybody has the same loadout. It's going to be kind of a good way to jump in and test out the different classes, test out the different weapons and loadouts. And I think this game mode will be particularly popular at launch, because it tends to be with games like this that balancing isn't always the greatest up front. So for example, if one of the SMGs is like super busted, or if one of the classes is just really overpowered, this will be kind of a way to jump into a game mode where everybody's on the same playing field and you're not just getting nuked by the same overpowered, you know, whatever. And lastly, Orbital Purge is going to be the competitive game mode, which is essentially search and destroy, and with no respawns. So this game mode is going to be heavily reliant on team composition, most likely going to be really reliant on positioning, as well as communication and coordination with your team. So if competitive is your thing, this is what you're going to have to look forward to. They have not announced if there's going to be more game modes in the future, but they do specify that at launch, there's going to be 4 game modes. So I'm expecting to see, at the very least, a rotating playlist of different game modes, but we'll see. As far as campaigns, not at launch, unfortunately. Not at launch. To be expected. They do say that they would like to add a campaign on as a DLC. Multiplayer was prioritized as their small studio, as I said, with limited resources. So that's kind of where they're at. At launch, it's going to be only competitive multiplayer. Although I do hope the studio grows, and I do hope to see a campaign for this game. I do like playing campaigns in shooters specifically, and just with the overall aesthetic, I think they could do some pretty creative things as far as showcasing the mechanics of the game, the graphics, and stuff like that. So Boundary is going to be a class-based shooter, similar to Team Fortress 2 or even some of the really old Call of Duty games. And so each of these classes is going to come with their own unique weapons as well as their own unique abilities. Now, I'm not personally a big fan of locking weapons behind specific classes, but if they balance this right, it could work. It could very well work. Each class is also said to have their own unique ability, and the example that they gave in the interview with Noisy Pixel was that snipers can float in place while aiming down sights. Because you got to keep in mind, it's zero gravity. You're not just gonna slowly come to a stop as you're moving. You will just literally keep continuing in the direction that you're moving until you try, to move in a different direction, which is going to create some very, very unique combat mechanics, and it's kind of going to make players adjust to this new setting, which I think is really awesome. I think we really need a shakeup like this in the shooter genre, and hopefully they can deliver something that's really polished and, can stand on its own 2 feet. As far as weapon customization, it seems a lot like what we see in today's Call of Duty franchise. Again, weapons are locked behind certain classes, but each weapon's basically going to have a base model and attachments that can be added for additional bonuses. And weapon customization apparently gets pretty deep with this game, which I absolutely love. According to Gamers Pack, quote, the player can arrange the order of the bullets in their magazine, choosing from armor-piercing to explosive bullets and electromagnetic bullets that interfere with the opponent's spacesuit. Wow. First of all, pretty cool that you can pick different types of ammunition. That on its own shows pretty deep levels of customization, but down to the order of the bullets in the magazine, that's insane. If you want to start off with armor-piercing bullets, for example, to pierce through the opponent's armor, and then load that second half of the magazine with explosive bullets to do some serious damage to the body, that looks like something that's actually going to be possible, which is freaking sick. The feel of the game is obviously space combat, but Surgical Scalpel said that they wanted the combat to not be too futuristic. Director Frank Mingbo Lee states, quote, we didn't want to jump decades into the future with laser-based weapons or bolt guns, and wanted to keep the weapon technology based on modern military bullet-firing designs. The idea being that the concept has a more realistic sense of attachment for players to the concept of combat in space. And that's just what I think is one of the things that makes this game so unique. Like I said in the intro of the video, when you think outer space combat, you're thinking flying robots, you're thinking lasers, you're thinking, like you said, bolt guns, fucking teleporting, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Not here. And that's why I keep referring to the COD aesthetic of the game, because it basically is Call of Duty in space, and it seems like they're nailing the mechanics down pretty well. Again, if you're just watching this gameplay, it looks insanely smooth. Boundary will launch with 8 unique maps, which is most definitely better than the previously predicted 4 to 6, and environmental destruction is very much a thing. They even said that, say you blast a piece off of a wall on your space station or whatever, if that piece of the wall goes flying fast enough and hits another player, it will kill them. So that's something that you're going to have to watch out for. Again, very mechanically sound and well-rounded game. When asked about VR support, Mingbo Lee says, quote, they did experiment with PSVR to see how the technology could potentially interface with what we're bringing to the FPS genre. We're excited about VR, and the possibilities with the technology feel that it's not quite at a place where we'd like to be in order to support a full launch experience just yet. Now, I've played my fair share of VR shooters, and they are insanely fun. I don't know if you guys played Iron Man VR, because, let me take a step back, because my thing was, okay, if you're standing on the ground, how are you going to feel like you're floating? It seems like you might even get a more immersive experience if you were just sitting in a chair and kind of fully immersed into the game that you're playing. But then I remembered back to Iron Man VR, where you literally are Iron Man. Guys, if you haven't played that game, real quick, shout out to Iron Man VR. You got the 2 controllers in each of your hands that operate exactly like Iron Man's hand thrusters. So you put your hands facing downwards and you're going to fly up. You put your hands facing forwards, you're going to fly backwards, and you completely forget that you are actually standing on solid ground. You feel like you're flying. It's absolutely insane. I really do hope to see VR support in the future of this game. The only thing that would be concerning to me is, basically you're aiming in all directions, up, down, left, right, on every plane. And, with a cord tied to your head, that might get a little, things might get a little tangled, so to speak. But we'll see. I think it's a great idea, and I think that if it works out in the end, that, that's just another facet of this game and another thing that it kind of has to offer to the FPS genre. Now, briefly in that interview with Noisy Pixel, the question was, what's your favorite loadout to use? And Bingbo Lee said he liked to use snipers. And the reason he liked that is because he said he likes to calculate the trajectory of the bullets, and it makes hitting clutch shots even more rewarding. So, what I take from that is, snipers are projectile, okay? They're not hit scan, which is great. This is gonna add a very competitive element to the game, and a lot of games are actually moving this way. I'm wondering though, if other guns are also gonna be projectile, or if they're gonna be hit scan. And again, given that we're in space and not on the ground, gravity is not gonna be a thing. So even though it is projectile, the bullet will still travel in a perfectly straight line, right? It's not gonna fall to the ground because there's no gravity. And same thing like, if you throw a grenade, it's going straight until it explodes, unless it bounces off something. Even games with the most advanced fluid combat mechanics and movement mechanics, down is always down, not in Boundary. This is really, really gonna force players to think differently than they normally would in a game like this. And same thing goes for med kits, floating debris, and so on. As far as other mechanics in the game, you get a grappling hook to help you move around, which also seems pretty fluid and well polished from the gameplay that you see in front of you. And you also get magnetic boots. So just a couple other options to help you navigate these strange, 3D type maps. My main concerns with the game are, number one, map variety. The only thing we've really seen is space stations. And while there are quite a few different space stations with different aesthetics, in the end, you are at a space station in orbit fighting. So how can they bring variety to a game like this, considering that the setting is so concrete? I would like to see maybe a greenhouse on a space station. Obviously they're going to be able to change the background, so maybe on one map you're orbiting Jupiter and maybe on one map you're orbiting Earth. Who knows? Right now, no price has been announced. I really hope they go with a more middle of the road approach. If the game came out and it was $60, I feel like that would be just a little bit too much to ask just for what the game has to offer currently. And I also hope that they don't go with a free-to-play approach. Especially recently, free-to-play games have been notoriously anti-player. If they do go free-to-play, I really hope that, the in-game cash shop is cosmetic only, and that the battle pass rewards are reasonably balanced. If they do it that way, then I think I'd be all right with that, but I really hope that the game launches for $20 to $40, something kind of middle of the road that everybody can kind of wrap their heads around, and just drop just a little bit of cash to play something a little bit different like this. Now here's the thing with this game, you guys. I think it's going to be a very technically sound, enjoyable, and deep experience. I think it will be limited up front, but Surgical Scalpels have stated that they are going to continue support for the game after launch. So who knows how many maps we're going to have? Who knows how many additional guns? Who knows if they're going to throw a battle pass at us? Just a lot up in the air right now. My fear for this game is that everybody downloads it, everybody plays it for a month, everybody forgets about it. I'm really thinking that, and I'm hoping not. I really want this game to be successful and a standout member of the FPS genre and, hold a special place in the hearts of FPS players. What I predict happening, as is the trend with a lot of games developed by smaller studios, even if the game is really well polished, I see people playing it up front, and then everybody leaving it except for a couple dedicated fans, where it's not everybody's cup of tea, everybody goes back to Call of Duty, and then there's a few dedicated fans who continue playing with each other, and I could see, potentially benefits from that. You might get a really, really well-rounded and wholesome community, as you generally do with those type of games. But then at the same time, it's for those guys who haven't played in a couple years, they come back to the game, those same 5,000 people, 4,500, however many small amount of people have been playing the entire time, they're just absolute gods. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I would like to see a lot of variety as far as player skill in this game. It seems like a game that's not going to be for everybody. It's probably going to be a lot harder than, most of the shooter games that we have, because again, you're moving through all three planes. You're not only moving forwards, backwards, left and right, but you're also moving up and down. And in this game, you can hardly even call it up and down. But me personally, I am very much looking forward to this type of challenge, and I've been looking for something to shake up the FPS meta, and I think at least fingers crossed, that Boundary is gonna be it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Be sure to leave a like if you did like the video, and again, subscribe if you want to see another video just like this next week. I will be sure to keep you guys updated on this game. I'm keeping a very close eye on it personally, so anything new that comes out, I'll be sure to let you guys know. And until the next video, guys, I'm BLUMONKEY, and I'll see you then. Peace.